Hey guys, welcome back to King's Outdoor Life. If you're new to the channel just because of this topic, check out some of my other videos and subscribe. But today we're going to put in the Goalrilla you see behind me. If you've bought a Goalrilla, you know how much they cost, but they are the best basketball goal on the market. But what you may not know, or if you're watching this video you need to know, is the mounting system is sold separately, and right now it's 140 bucks. I'm going to show you in this video how to make your own mounting system, and I've got a grand total of 20 bucks in it. So I saved 140 bucks. Well, I guess I spent 20, so I only saved 120, but there you go. It's mounted, and I will show you step by step how to go about doing it and save you 100 bucks as well. Thanks for watching. Click like and subscribe. So when you're setting your Goalrilla, the instructions will show you setting it back away from the edge of your concrete. Well, in this case, we're pouring a new driveway, so we have the forms coming through here, and you see I made a little bump out for the actual Goalrilla to be mounted out there on that little peninsula. When I did this at my other house, I just did a straight line, like straight square box here. But what I learned was people would step right there in this little angled corner, and it would make a low spot and then end up holding water. So this time I made this come out at a 45-degree angle, so we're gonna have a little extra concrete around it to hopefully make it not hold water around the goal there. So it'll make more sense once we pour this, but it'll make more sense once we pour this, but it works better in the long run. So pro tip number one when digging your hole, get a cardboard box or a piece of plywood and put your dirt on that, and it makes it easier to remove it. If you just put it straight on the grass, then it makes it harder to dig all that dirt out of the grass, and leaves, especially when it's mud, it leaves mud and dirt behind in your grass. So put something down, shovel your dirt out, put it on top of that, and then you can scoop the dirt off that box in this case in order to move it where you want it. So we got to dig a hole here 16 inches square straight down, and they recommend doing 48 inches deep. I think that's a little overkill. I may not go that deep, and then we'll put some rebar and metal in that hole to reinforce it. So here's our hole. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a giant root. There was a big oak tree here years ago. It's about an 8-inch diameter root. I've tried to cut through it with a chainsaw, and I can't do it. So I'm digging out in all directions. I can't get deep enough. Goalrilla recommends 48 inches. We're gonna get down around 30 inches and make a giant mushroom at the bottom of it. It'll hold me, surely. All right, so the next step is to cut you a plate that will resemble this plate that is the bottom of the goal. I had a piece of Luan that was from, I don't know what it was, from shipping of something. Anyway, just something that measures roughly 12 by 16, because you want to be able to mount it to the bottom of this to mark your holes to get your bolts in the exact place they need to be in your concrete, because they don't move much and you don't have much play here. So I'm gonna try to set the camera up here so you can see this. So I'm gonna put this on the exact place where it goes and try to put it even with at least two sides. So once you have two sides lined up, I'm gonna do the top side where I can see it, and I can see down this other side. If you had two people, ideally you would have somebody hold it while you mark the holes. This is my extra person that I use for everything. So I'm gonna clamp that on there, get it good and tight. Okay, now I still got a little play here. I can spin this. All right, but now the key is you got to mark these holes in the exact place because once you see the next step, you'll understand what we're doing. You have to mark these in the exact place, otherwise you won't have your bolts in the right place. So make sure I get good markings there. Make sure your staying flush on the sides. Make sure all holes marked. Okay, so once you release that, you'll see there I've got my bolts lined up and we're good to go. All right, so you can cut this off if you want to. It doesn't have to be any bigger than that, but you'll see in their next step, this will sit down on top of the concrete with our bolts run through them. So the next step is, what I have here is a piece of what's called all thread. It's a 3/4 inch, and you buy nuts that go with it. This all thread comes in different diameters. I want to get the biggest possible for the most strength. This is a 6 foot long piece, and I'll cut it into 18-inch pieces. So I'll have 4 18-inch bolts essentially to go through these holes on our plate. That'll go down in the concrete, go 15 inches, and leave 3 inches sticking up above. I guess we can go really 16 inches, leave 2 inches above, just enough to tighten down the goal on top. So I'm gonna mark this in 4 18-inch segments. I'll mark it and cut it with a hacksaw. So when you finish there, you'll have 4 bolts that are 18 inches long, and you want to make sure when you cut these that the threads come out in good enough shape that you can thread a bolt on there. If you can see there, you cut in between those threads. Sometimes it will mess up that thread, and you have to take either a file, a small file, or you can take a wheel with a, what do you call it, you know, if you have a grinding wheel on one side and a wire brush on the other side, you can take that and turn that wire brush and turn those threads in order to make sure you got a good starter thread in order to get those nuts started. Be sure that'll start on there, and then you'll want to cover those up with something to make sure concrete doesn't get on those threads and prevent you from being able to thread those nuts on these now 18-inch long bolts you've got. Next step is to drill holes in your plate. Let me take this drilling opportunity to point out 2 items of note. Notice the arrows there. I marked those to make sure I knew which direction my template was facing in relation to the goal. So you'll make sure you're facing those templates the same way you had your goal facing when you marked it. The second thing is you'll notice a hole right in the middle of this board. That did 2 things. One, it made a test hole. I can make sure my bolts fit through there properly. It also is a place to put your finger to hold this template later and to pull it off the concrete once you finish the concrete. Pro tip. Okay, so that's my last hole. And what will happen is these 4 will drop right down here like so. And now you've got your plate with your bolts. That will push down in the hole and go all the way down in the concrete just like that. Alright, so last step on this. Take some electrical tape, wrap your threads above your nuts to be sure you don't get concrete on those threads, because you don't want to mess up your threads there. And then something else I do is I put electrical tape on the bottom there just to keep that thing from sliding around so much. I just want to try to keep it pretty well in the same place. And then in case I forget to say it later, after you get this thing in the ground and get it tightened down, put a little paint, a little black paint or something on the ends of these all threads to try to keep it from rusting, because it will rust pretty quick. You may want to paint the whole nuts and everything black to match. It just looks better, but the main thing is if you can keep the water off those things, they'll rust, and I mean just a few days, because that metal is unprotected metal on the center of these all threads. So if you'll notice the ends that came from the factory, you really probably can't tell there, they got a little covering of some sort on the end of it just so they don't rust in the store. So put a little paint on there, maybe keep it from rusting. So when you get your concrete to this stage, you can push your plate all the way down in there. You want to be sure it's square along this line. Make sure that everything is square. The front is square to the front, and that's why you want to try to make sure this is square when you put it in there, because you want that all to be square. If not, your goal will be twisted, you know, like this way. It won't be in line with the rest of your court. It'll look bad because it just is very obvious. I had a friend who he didn't get his square and it just looked bad. But anyway, you want to make sure this is level. Take a small level and measure the level side to side, front to back, diagonally. You should make sure when you're pushing that down in there, you get that level always. And then try to make sure your bolts are vertical, otherwise it'll make it hard to set the gold down on those. So this one right here is a little bit twisted. I need to try to get that a little better on a vertical. And then you want to be sure water comes off each side of that. You want that plate level and then drop off each side of it. So there it is, it's finished. I got a buddy to come help me. We stood it up and it dropped right down on the bolts just like it was supposed to, with absolutely no trouble whatsoever. And I can't believe I forgot to videotape that. Or is it called videotape anymore? Anyway, I forgot to record it with the GoPro. So anyway, there's the finished product. Turned out great. I will say this. Let me get down close and see if you can see. I had to add washers under the front. When I checked for level, even as much painstaking process as I went to get it to be level, the gold leaned just a smidge, about 1/8 of an inch is all it took. It was leaning forward. So I put two washers under there and now it's perfect. So anyway, there's the finished product.